Hello, Nick. You're up next.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good, man. What are you playing out of?
We're playing a home game out of Nova Scotia,
Nova Scotia, the Halifax area,
the
perhaps?
Halifax area. Yep.
Scotia. Nova Scotia. How many Americans do you think knows the capital of Nova Scotia?
Not many.
They don't have any. I've never heard any actual legit poker there in that province. Right?
No, they have a poker room at the casino, but it's literally 6 tables and it's all 1-3 with a 5-5 PLO. There's
In Nova Scotia.
Yep.
Oh, they do. Okay, I didn't know. Okay.
But it's pretty bad. The rake's bad. Nothing. No free food. No free drinks. No one plays at the casino.
All right. So what are you playing for size of game here?
We're playing 1-2-5, which is a 3-blind game with a $10 straddle.
Wow. And you're playing 9-handed or
8-handed.
So
we do play 9-handed, but at this point it was 8-handed.
So half the table is in the blind, every hand.
Yeah.
That reminds me a lot of Texas. I played in a few Texas streams like this too. Sometimes you'll see it at the lodge, and I've talked about this too. I mean, it's not something that's very common for a lot of players to go into public rooms. They'll never encounter this. But if you're ever in a situation like this, people don't understand that, like, you have to adjust for the fact that people have not seen their hand. Like, I'll give you the easiest example that I can say is, like, say you were playing a 4-blind game and you were playing like 5-handed or something like that, right? And you were on the button. You're like, I'm just going to open a button range. I mean, maybe that's not the best example because it's short-handed. The point is that nobody's looked at their hands yet, because so you don't get to open necessarily as wide if you're in the cutoff in this spot. Like, say you're in the cutoff and it goes fold, and now all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to open a cutoff range. Well, you actually have 4 unseen hands. Now, obviously they're out of position, but it's different because they haven't acted yet. Okay, so 1-2-5. How deep are you guys?
I'm $2,850 deep.
Okay.
And most of the players at the table are $2,000 to $3,500.
Okay.
It's a $200 to $500 buy-in, but you can buy 1,000 once you're in for 1,000. It's probably 2-3 in the morning at this point, and so it's been the same table all night, and everyone's just super deep.
So
except for one player, which we will get to.
People drinking and stuff like that?
Yes, one guy specifically. Everyone's had a few beers here and there, but one guy has been clocking back the rum, and he is the VIP in this hand.
Okay, so 2850 effective.
Yep.
All right.
So the under the gun opens to $35.
Okay.
Hijack calls, and the button calls. I'm in a small blind with Jack of clubs, Jack of spades, and I size up and 3-bet to $210.
Jack of clubs, Jack of spades to 210.
Yes. Now the straddle, who is the VIP, calls. And the under the gun folds. The hijack is all in for exactly $210. And that was the only short stack at the table. And then the button folds.
Hijack calls all in.
Yes.
All right, so let me see if I just got this. And you guys are 2850 sort of deep with the straddle?
Yes, the straddle has me covered.
All right, so under the gun to 35, hijack calls, who's short, button calls, hero 3-bets.
No, button folds. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, button calls, small
right.
button.
So hero 3-bets to 210. So you go like sort of 4x plus the calls. It's fine. Straddle calls, cold call 3-bets. You get under the gun to fold. Hijack, who's the shorty, is now all in, calls all in, and then the button folds. And now you're just heads up on the side against the straddle. All right. So 420, 630, maybe like 675, something like that in the pot.
With the blinds, it was 707, so $700 in the middle.
Okay, 700. Okay.
So yeah, we're heads up to the flop with 1 all in. And the flop is ace of hearts, 2 of clubs, 7 of diamonds.
Ace of hearts, 2 of clubs, 7 of diamonds. Of course, you're out of position, right, to the straddle. Okay.
And I think this is probably my mistake is I down bet to 175 to kind of try and play my range here.
So before you say anything about this, so this is one that, obviously as computing and stuff gets a lot powerful, when you talk about like GTO Wizard, right, which is one of the browser-based type of solver, and people are starting to get access, because you used to have to run sims, right? Like on the side, it would take a lot of computer power. As these things are getting, computers are getting like more and more powerful, it sort of gives, I think, people the opportunity to run certain scenarios that might not have like run their own sims. What I haven't seen, and maybe people can school me on this though, are these situations though, and maybe because it's like a crazy game tree type of issue, these situations on how somebody who's all in, who, with no more betting affects certain ranges and bet sizing on certain boards. Because obviously if you were just heads up, let's say the straddle called and you were heads up and you're like, all right, I'm going to make a range-ish protection bet here, down bet here on ace deuce seven. And, you look at certain types of flops that you bucket, right? Like ace rag, like, not connected. You say, oh yeah, this is a sizing. But obviously things change when somebody's all in. And the way that I think it affects live poker, especially if you don't have a side pot built right now, and we're just going to assuming that it's basically, maybe there's a little bit, but for our purposes here, like it's just 700 main right now. You don't have anything built.
No, there's $0 on the side.
You don't usually see someone starting to like bluff with air if you check to them. The straddle isn't going to suddenly like bluff like 9-10 of clubs here. They're usually going to take cards and that's because they have to beat the other guy, right? They got to beat the other guy who's all in. Now, does your hand need a little bit of protection? Maybe against like certain like types of, overcards. Sure. Can you get called by worse if you go small enough some of the time? Sure. And what did you think the straddle's like cold calling range here is?
It's really hard to put him on when he has played a lot of pots. So yeah, it's really hard to put him on a range.
It's just hard. You just think he can have like a lot of different hands,
like suited connectors. He can have, low pairs. He can have, of course, ace 10, ace 9 kind of hands like those as well. But I think that a lot of the time he might have a pair.
Well, I don't, then here's my take for the way that I would shape this hand. I can sort of get on board with your small sizing here. And I think what I would do then is probably play like bet. And then if you get called, you just kind of hope to go to showdown, which can be a little bit difficult from out of position. But again, say you go 175 and he calls and then, it turns like a 4 or something and you check. A lot of these VIPs are just going to check through like 8-7 or like pocket 8s, pocket 9s. They're just not going to suddenly like blast off here on the turn. So if you want to get your value and your protection now from weaker, then probably the flop is the place to do it. Because if it goes check, check and he has 8-7 and then the turn's like a queen and then you can't put any more money in and the turn's a 10 and he just folds out. So you could just play this as bet, and if you get called, check turn. And I would probably do a lot of folding on turn if he were to bet, like if it was ace deuce 7 and the turn's like a 5 or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what it was weird to take a certain sizing on this because I'm going into a dry side, but also, it's a decent sized main pot. And so that was my plan, was to just, check turn once he
if he called.
Shut down if he calls.
Yeah.
And he does call like semi-quickly, probably 20, 30 seconds. So I had every plan of shutting down until the turn was the jack of hearts.
Oh, wow. So so 700 main, 350 side. Now, this is really interesting here on this live stream because I know that we're actually going to get a couple of there are going to be calls from Nate and Mike about turn check raises. Now, their hands are actually going to be a little bit thinner turn check raises of the preflop raiser. Yours, obviously, is pretty much the stone cold nuts. I don't think the straddle is just like flatting with like ace, right? Or the hijack the first time. So, I mean, you've got like the nuts right now. Now, so how do you play this spot? Because you guys are deep on the side. And I guess my take here would be it's probably not. There's two schools of thought here. So if he has ace-x, he's going to still call, right? And I guess it would come down to, and we don't necessarily know this, is that like how often does ace-x check back the turn here? Or does ace-x always bet? Because again, like even though you've got a nice little, starting to build a side pot here, people will play way more straight up when there's a guy all in. And I think I would make the case that a lot of non-aces up hands do a lot more checking through on turn when there's a guy all in. So if you believe me there, then you might just want to play this one straight up and just continue to bet. My thought was that sometimes you might actually go for a check raise here, because if he's always betting off ace X, you can kind of like do a little dink and dunk check raise and get more money into the pot. And you don't care if he has like 8-7 and he checks it through. He might like catch up to a 7 or an 8. Like he's not calling a bet anyways. That's the case for check raising. But again, I kind of go back to this whole thing of, well, it is a protected pot and it would just suck if he checks back like ace 6. And if he truly is like a VIP here, sure, he could have like 7-8, but you know what the huge clump of hands that he's probably has is like ace X. So the more I talk through this, the more I actually just like to play this one straight up, and I wouldn't get cute with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought too, is I think that he can check back some ace X's here. So I wanted to kind of pull a little bit more value out. So I bet 255.
255 into 1,050?
Yeah, but it was like that. That's where I think that my second mistake was the sizing on the turn. But I was also kind of thinking small into the side pot because I wanted to keep his ace X's around.
Yeah, but he can see the main pot. I think that's way too small. I don't know what that really accomplishes unless like you're trying to like rope him in with like pocket 8s or 7 here. I mean, I would go 5, maybe half-ish, 400 to 500. And if he's a true VIP and he's never folding an ace, then you can even go larger, 6 to 7. If he's never folding an ace, if he's really that true of a VIP and you go 6 to 7 here, the total pot, if you were to go like 7, would be like 2,400. And then you guys would have like, 1,800 left. You would have put in like, 1,000 already. If you bet 6 to 7, you went 175 on flop and 210, and it just sets up a nice amount at the end. I don't know if you can even if you were to go 700 call, the jam would be like 18. I mean, you'd have to be a huge whale to call off of like ace 10, but I do definitely think that 250 is way too small.
Yeah, and I think that was my biggest mistake. He pretty quickly calls, and the river is the 5 of hearts.
All right, so the 5 of hearts comes in the river. So again, the board is ace of hearts, deuce of clubs, 7 of diamonds. Hero has Jack. Jack makes a small C bet into this VIP whale straddle with one guy all in, 175 call out of the small blind. Turns the Jack of hearts. He turns a set, bets really small, bets 250, straddle calls, 850 on the side, 700 on the main, and then the 5 of hearts comes at the end, which puts in the backdoor heart draw. Now, is it possible that he could have a flush here? It's possible, in the form of the most likely flush that he would have here would be like 7x of hearts, right? Like a 7-8 of hearts, 7-9 of hearts, because it is a 3-bet pot. And if he's some sort of super whale, and he could king deuce of hearts, 3-4, 4-5 of hearts, something like that for a super whale, which is the one straight draw on the flop in the form of bottom end wheel that backs in. But, and this is a big but though, there's still way more ace X hands than backdoor flushes here. So it's not like this river is scary for me. Now, if I get pressure applied when I value bet, like if you were to bet and get raised, we can certainly talk about that. But somebody saying, oh, you should check call here at the end. Check calling would be and I'm not saying that you said this, Nick, but that would be like the worst play in the world. I mean, that would be awful when he's going to call you with ace X and then check behind with ace X, right?
Yeah, and that's what I think I can, yeah, exactly. I don't want to let this just go check call because I think he can check back a lot of aces here and then I just lose value. But I think this is maybe where I still continue to bet too small because I was thinking I just was not thinking about the pot, and I was thinking more of like how much can I get out of him? And I didn't want to go too big and scare him away because a triple barrel is going to look pretty strong. I still want calls out of ace 10, ace 9. I
think I would bet like 8 or so the pot's 1550. Again, it really comes down to like how big a whale this guy is, but 800, something like that. I mean, and again, this is another one of these things where it's like, it starts to get very, very complex because one thing is that you look super strong, right? Because you got to beat the other guy in the main pot. So it's like your bluffing frequency is down. However, you also have to, and sometimes I lose track of this though, but now there's like legitimate side pot, though, where there could be some bluffs to win the side pot, too. So how much did you bet?
I bet 400.
No, I think that's too small.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, I think I bet too small.
Because I think he's calling with the same rate. If he really is a VIP, I would have definitely bet more on turn and bet more on river. So you go 400 here, okay?
And then the straddle raises to 900.
To 900?
Yeah. And to preface, he had been caught bluff raising river twice earlier in the night. However, it's not like he does it all the time. But I had seen twice where he had bluff raised river.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, 19 to 28, 500 for you to call. There's no way I'm ever folding to a min raise here. I mean, he might even have some hands that he might have backed into. I didn't read the rest of your, like I said, I try to keep as hazy as possible in the details when I'm picking hands. I think a much more interesting situation would be if he jammed all in. Like if you went 400 and he jammed all in, I think you might even be able to find a tough fold, but we could play cat and mouse and say, well, did you possibly induce a spot like this? I mean, going into the river, it looks like you guys had like, what, I don't know, 23, 2,400, something like that, or maybe a little bit less than that. So if you go 8 and like he jammed for like 21, I think we could definitely talk about folding here. I'm not going to fold to a min raise. That's for sure.
I think I actually would have liked it more if it was a jam, because the min raise just seems so strong. And so I thought about it for a while, and I think that there is, a few hands I beat, like,
ace 5
or ace 5.
Yeah.
Ace 5 was kind of my number one. It was hard to put him on a flush given the ace of hearts out there. If it was a different heart and it was the ace of clubs, for example, I could, he could float with more backdoor nut flushes. But
and again, and like I said, we can. I'm reading the river here, and the thoughts that I think we all agree. Everyone agrees this is a call to a min raise. If he jams, though, and again, it looks like you guys have put in 210, 400, 650. He'd have like 21 or 2,200 left. If he jams, you're actually getting a worse price than what I would have bet. But it's just again, you go back to the fact that there's another person in the hand too. I mean, yeah, you would have built up a big side pot. Like if I go 800 here and then he jams for like 21, sure, he could be bluffing me off the 1,600 side, but I just don't know if a whale has that in him, because he'd have to turn something into a bluff, right? He'd have to turn something into a bluff, and like, I supposedly like the key card here would be like the king of hearts, but how does he have an offsuit king? That's one of the other things too, like king 7 off in a 3-bet pot with the king of hearts, right? Here we just call. If he's got his beat, you got his beat. I assume you called.
I did, yeah. So I called, and he shows king 6 of hearts.
King 6 of hearts. Wow.
Yeah.
So nothing on the flop. Nothing on the flop.
Pure backdoor.
Wow. Nothing on the flop, which goes back to my turn play where I wonder, I think this is the difference, right? Between a pot that's protected and not protected. If you don't have a guy who's all in pre-flop, and you get this ace deuce 7 flop and you bet with jacks and he calls with king 6 of hearts and the turn's a jack of hearts and you guys are heads up and you check the turn, he's going to bet the turn a lot with a king high flush draw, to try to bluff you off of a non-ace. But with a guy in the hand, I think he checks that back a lot on the turn. That's the main difference I'm trying to get at. Like the frequency of check back there goes up. Wow, he really fucked that. I mean, I don't know how much you would have called. What if he raises to like 1,200, something like that?
Yeah, like like I was saying earlier, I think the bigger sizing I like more, because it just seems so much more bluffy. Like I don't like the min click at all, because it just seems like so much value. Like he is a VIP, but he still does know, what he's doing. So yeah, it's just not the hand I expected him to show up with. Like you said, I could see 8-7 of hearts, or maybe even like a hand like 9-10 of hearts with, a couple backdoor options he could hit on the turn. But king 6 of hearts was just like...
I'm going to throw something else at you guys that and again, I'm not going to give this guy the credit for the VIP, but what if you had like ace, what if all you guys watching this had ace king in this spot with the king of hearts? So you flatted the small blind 3-bet. I know, we don't usually, really promote flatting 3-bets, But sometimes we get there. Sometimes. Say you have ace king off and you flat and you're in the straddle spot, and then you face this action. And then at the end, it's interesting. So if you had ace king with the king of hearts and then you're in the straddle, would you ever turn that into a bluff versus a bet, blocking pocket aces and then having, although the problem though is that it's just so unlikely that we could really ever have a flush here with the distribution of the suits. The only thing that would be possible is if we somehow backed in, or you look at this ace deuce seven, if we float to the small bet. But interesting one. Thanks very much for the call. I appreciate it.
Thank you.